Happy Thursday, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very excited. I've been looking forward to this session on connecting and collaborating with family offices. For those whom I haven't had the opportunity to meet, I'm Danielle Patterson, CEO of Family Office List, and I'm thrilled to have you here. I know time is our most precious commodity, so I'm very grateful that you chose to spend it with Ryan and I today. I know we're going to learn a lot. Ryan Austin is an expert. He's the founder and CEO of Erendite Advisors, and he has extensive experience connecting leading edge companies with family offices and ultra high net worth individuals. And so today he'll really be sharing his valuable insights into building strategic partnerships and securing key investments across all sectors like AI, cybersecurity, fintech, and Web3. Ryan is also, this is exciting, a strategic advisor for Family Office World Media with Ron Diamond, and it's a platform, community hub for family offices to collaborate, upskill, and innovate. So he's definitely got his expertise, and his work has been featured in publications including NASDAQ, Crane Currency, Entrepreneur, and Business Insider. So yes, very, very pleased to have you here, Ryan.
Thank you.
Yeah, today's conversation will really focus on key principles for successfully collaborating with family offices. And we'll talk about, practical strategies to build trust and how to differentiate your pitch and leverage long-term relationships. We'll also give some insights on emerging trends and really how entrepreneurs can align with these evolving priorities. So before we dive right in, just a couple housekeeping notes. I think most of you have found your way to the chat. Feel free, use the chat, introduce yourselves, network, but we want this session to be engaging. This is really about you all. This is why we make them live. So things tend to get buried in the chat. If you don't mind, use the Q&A. And today's presentation is really just a conversation. So we want to include you in that. Feel free. I have a series of questions I'm going to ask Ryan, but if you have your own questions, I'll make sure to incorporate those. So yeah, without further ado, I would love, Ryan, I kind of gave you your high level bio, but I'd love to know a little of the backstory. Tell us how you really fell into this world of family offices.
Sure. And that's probably the best way to put it. You fall into this space, right? It's, historically been around since as long as there have been dynasties, right? You've had families that, whether it was the nobility or, the people at the top of different hierarchies. I think actually at Ron's speech at Harvard, he said Akbar the Great might be the first example of like a family office, the way that we view them today. Um, but basically, I would say it's a mix of location and just chance. I grew up on Long Island, North Shore, Port Jefferson, which is around the hub and the influence of Stony Brook University. So that meant, I grew up and am friendly with, people from Renaissance Technologies, the Medallion Fund, Jim Simons, who just passed away this past year. And so it's a mix of that, right? Growing up, going to high school with some people who really, their fathers ran hedge funds and things of that nature. So I went to Stony Brook University. I was an English major, right? I didn't know if I wanted to be a professor or, something else. And as I got farther along in, finishing up my undergrad, I realized that I would like, I'm a writer. That's like my skill, right? I was never a great student, but I was a good writer. I wanted to figure out how to monetize it. And I met this retired stockbroker from Chicago, probably like my first professional mentor, Roland Perry. And he was running a very small, like boutique investor relations slash PR firm. And he really showed me the ropes of like equities and, writing investor research reports, doing analysis on like key financials, things that I never really learned in school. But he was a really cool writer. And to this day, I think his website, Internet Stock Review, his company's institutional analyst, but he's a fun guy. And he introduced me to a lot of these different executives and his clients that he was working with, usually like small mid-cap companies that were overlooked by Wall Street.
Yeah.
So I worked with Roland, pretty before I even graduated, like, and then right out of the gate for a year or two. And then I moved on to a company called Corporate Connect, and they had a similar model and client base, but one of their features was family office introductions. Like they had a package for their family office network, and
Wow.
that intrigued me immediately, right? Like I was
Yeah.
brought on as kind of a junior analyst slash staff writer, and I would do articles. I would, write about the companies, their clients. But it was a small enough company, and I was green and very hungry.
Yeah.
And they were like, Ryan, why don't, instead of just writing about the, biotech family office symposium that we're having in the city, in New York City, why don't you help, reach out to our family offices and be the point of contact, see if they're willing to come to the conference, like, which is pretty, I would say, for a family office package, it's a pretty special opportunity.
That is.
Um, and I did, and I jumped on it, and that's really where I kind of inherited this great network of families. And I think they liked me because I was so young and sincere, right? I like making friends with people. I'm very
Yeah.
sociable and communicative, but I was interested in where they got their start. Thomas Guterman, who's from the Guterman family office over in Germany, he was like one of my first family office contacts ever, and he was just so cool and friendly and warm, and that's kind of like a underpinning theme, I think, when it comes to connecting with any family office. um, they're almost always, depending on the context, very guarded.
Hmm.
So coming to them with your hands out or coming to them with a pitch is immediately going to put up a shield, right? So I think I threw him off a little bit by just inviting to fly him out from Germany to New York to basically, party for a weekend during the symposium. And it was great. And I have
Amazing.
dozens of other stories of different families like that. So after that, I ended up moving to Sarasota, Florida. I have family down there. My mom, and I'm the oldest of six, so I have a lot of siblings. The two youngest were going to school there. And I stepped away from like the finance equity space altogether, and I helped run editorial for a PR distribution firm called Newswire.com. I think they actually just sold to Access Wire a few years ago. I learned about that. And I was in more of the PR and media marketing world. And this
Yeah.
is when 2017, 2018, Bitcoin and crypto was really starting to transcend the mainstream consciousness. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And then I asked my families, what do you think? And they were like, no way. We want nothing. We want nothing to
Yeah.
do with this. So, and I guess also maybe an important point, I maintained and nurtured the relationships that I had. And at that point, after leaving Corporate Connect, that we had thousands of family offices in the database that I probably wasn't supposed to take with me, but I knew most of them anyway. So,
Ooh,
well, too late now. Yeah,
busted.
whoops. No, we left on good terms. But I was at Newswire for almost 2 years, and I made good relationships with these executives for crypto, Web3, blockchain companies, right? I created like an editorial process. This is kind of a deep cut, we're going back a few years, but that those years, like 2018 specifically, is when the SEC started to put out initial guidelines on where they see, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in the scheme of things and regulations. So I put in place, ways so that we could publish press releases without getting them in trouble. And we started to corner a lot of the business in that space. And they called this the ICO bubble. There were a lot of ICOs at the time, initial coin offerings, right? Like an IPO.
Yeah.
And there were legit ones, there were not legit ones. It was more of a bubble, to be honest, but we were doing so well. They were sending me, the editor, I wasn't even a sales guy, to like the World Blockchain Forum in New York
Wow.
from Florida. Well, I was happy to just go home. And Miami as well, for Crypto Pro Miami during the Art Basel Festival. So it was fun, and I liked the space, and I liked the people, like the entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
So when I left Newswire, I started working in that space, and I worked for some of the biggest crypto exchanges in the world: CXIO, OKX. And then the last one, it's like a couple of years, we're jumping forward a few years. I didn't want to I don't want to go too far off the rails. But Prometheum, which was really special because they were creating a crypto product as a regulated security for businesses, and they still exist. They did their Series A, I think, right around the time they brought me on. And then the infrastructure of crypto started to take a blow. You had Sam Bankman-Fried. He got into some trouble. Obviously, the Terra Luna debacle. I just and again, like I knew the value I had was the relationships with these families. I wasn't really leveraging them. They were not very interested in crypto, and I'm
Right.
like, at the end of that whole experience, which was great, I met a lot of great people, and I just was like, maybe I like working with startups more than I like the blockchain space. So I launched Erendite Advisors, and I was advising actually, and like a strategic advisor, and I was working as fractional CMO for a
Mhm.
couple of like crypto startups, but the money dried up. It was, the crypto winter, they called it. I'm like, let me go to my roots. Let me work with startups and companies that are looking for funding. And I think I could put it all together. And that's when I
That's
started Arendite Advisors.
It
Yeah.
all makes sense. Now, I know in your early stages of Erendite, you kind of specialized in Series A. Do you still have that focus or?
No, thank you. My website would tell you, but we need to update that. No, and so I had, again, consulting with the family offices that I had,
Yeah,
practically, I thought, I love startups, like I said, right? Pre-seed, seed, those are tough. Those are tough stages to bring any institutional investor in. Real, depending on, again, there's always circumstances, but family offices are very risk averse usually. But I thought that Series A was the right mix of, you could create the most alpha there practically,
yeah,
really,
yeah.
if you bring in an investor. Now, I
Proof
still work with
revenue.
Series A's, but when clients started to come in and I found my stride with Arendite, and what we do at Arendite is we connect founders with family offices. We do capital introductions, right? The big part of it that is the institutional awareness campaign. That's how we go from point A to point B, but ultimately that's what we do. We're not broker dealers, we're not placement agents, right? It's retainer based. Um, we started at Series A and we wound up like everywhere but really.
The
So started doing direct investments.
market demands. Yeah,
Yes, whatever the market demands, and right, and whatever families are willing to invest
yeah,
in, and pre-IPO companies we worked with. We did, yep, Series A, Series B, Series C companies more recently, and then this year, but around spring, we started taking on venture funds. So AI space, that was our first venture capital firm, or fund rather, and we started opening the doors up to that too, and kind of bringing it full circle with regards to Neil Green and LA. There were so many real estate moguls at that conference. It was like 80% of the people there. And I learned a lot there. And I know the one thing across the board that family offices invest in is real estate, right? Even if they didn't make their, if that's not, even if that's not what got them to the party, they always have some sort of real estate holdings. So
right.
that's something we've been looking at more closely.
Very cool. I know you. We've had a relationship now for a while. And I listened to the Matt Balaker podcast, so I learned all about like your childhood, but I just learned like new things from you. This is amazing. Thank you for
Oh, I try to switch it
taking
up.
us
My
through.
pleasure.
Awesome. Yeah, keep us on our toes.
That's
So
right.
I'm sure most of the attendees here, know of family offices. That's why they joined. But let's break it down. Let's take it from the very basics. What
Mhm.
are family offices and kind of what sets them apart from other institutional investors?
Sure. And that's a great question. And as far as I know, there actually isn't much in the way of like a concise, clearly agreed upon definition for what a family office is. But generally, it's a private wealth management firm designed around preserving the wealth preservation of a family. Um, their stats, and I forget the specifics. I mean, we talked about this in the past. From Gen 1 to Gen 2, I think 40% of families preserve their wealth. It usually evaporates by the second or third generation, and then for Gen
Yeah,
4, it's like 5%, right? At least in the US, I believe those are the figures. Might be global. I know it's a little bit different overseas, right? If you, again, I mentioned the Guterman family. He's been around. They have some like rich history. They were fur traders in Vienna back in the 1800s. Granted, a little bit different, right? Economy.
yeah.
But that's the goal of the family. It's to prioritize capital preservation across the generations. Um, and that therefore they're looking for stability, right?
Yeah.
If you have a huge liquidity event, 150, 200 million, a family office starts making sense, right? Hire a couple of lawyers, estate, planners, you get wealth managers even. So, and again, there's also, it's like like hotly debated, what is the bar for a single family office, right?
Totally.
Anything less than, Ron says 250, I think. He
Yeah.
might have even dropped 300, like his numbers going up the other
Yes,
day.
I was like, I want to ask him. I want to like interview him. I'm like, it was always 100 million for years, and now
Yes.
it was 200. Now it's 250, and so yeah, now you're hearing
Uh,
300. Well,
Inflation,
yeah,
yeah, who
exactly.
knows?
We're getting
But
old.
then, yeah, then you have then you have multifamily offices, which he and I agree with him. That's making more sense for the majority of ultra high net worth individuals.
Mhm.
You share the resources, right? You share the attorneys, wealth managers, the different people that their job is solely to preserve the wealth. Sharing that resources over a couple of ultra high net worth families, that makes more sense when you're depending on the figures, and that I agree with him there, on the 200, or yeah, it used to be
Yeah.
150. I agreed with him on 250. 300 maybe is getting a little gratuitous, but nonetheless,
But I guess the
it's
point
shifting.
there is, yeah, and the point there is there's no like parameter. You don't have to go like with a multifamily office, you have to, or a registered investment advisor, register with the SEC, but nothing like that exists for the family office world. So yeah,
Right. And there are big tax benefits too. And that's again, and why I think like and I've done thought leadership pieces on, some of the platforms that you mentioned, like Crane Currency and NASDAQ.
mhm,
I think families are starting to take a larger, seat at the table of startup funding. You're starting to see them interact and fund a lot of these interesting projects. And I think it's like when a family office who, they cut their teeth in the tech space is investing in a tech startup and
right,
offering operational, expertise, that's like the perfect alignment, right? That's what we try to do at Arendite. That's when
yeah,
things work out because they can, and I won't go too deep into it, but things like patient capital, taxes, being able to sit on the invest permanent capital forever.
yeah.
You're not going to get that with a private equity or venture capital firm, right? They're financial engineers. They're not strategic or operational partners. That's what I think the benefit of having a family office investor really is.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan. That's a great way to look at it. Just the wealth preservation, highly customized. Yeah.
Yes.
So thinking about this, yes, this long-term patient capital, I guess it really does shape, their decision making. So how do family offices typically structure their investment decision making process?
That really depends, honestly. So if you have like you can have the gold standard, right, where you have the Pritzker families or the Dell family. Um, they have a team. They are like the upper echelon. They have 30 people that work just on investments, right, in-house. They have the due diligence. They have people that structure it. Then and that's like the 1% of family offices. You have many competent family offices that are actively taking place and doing it, but it's hard to say. It really depends on the family. Some families are more adventurous or they'll make riskier moves than others. Others are, Cargill family, perfect example. They are like tight, conservative, very risk averse. Um, they know what they're looking for and they go for that. You're not going to see them really step outside of their comfort zone.
Right.
um so it's hard to say. I mean, in terms of the deals that I've done with my clients, which again, they now the net is huge, but ranging from like Series A to pre-IPO, it's been between 5 and 10 million. That's been the sweet spot. But again, it also depends on, is it a Series A? What are they looking to raise? It depends on the company that is looking for the investment. Um, so I don't know if I could really narrow in too specifically on there.
No, that's awesome. So insightful. And I kind of want to, you touched on their priorities and it really varies the size of the family office. so we know that they're trying to preserve their wealth, and some of them are more risk adverse, so that will definitely, curb their growth strategies. But one of our attendees, Mike, asked, can you touch on the venture and its risk versus this wealth preservation, less risky strategy?
Sure. So again, it depends. So like, I guess something I can say, and this is something that's been recorded, and you're seeing, and Danielle, it might have been you who were talking about the Camden report. They just did like a survey of a couple hundred North American family
Yeah.
offices like a month or two ago, 183. That was the figure. And they tried to find, across the board, what are the trends that we're looking at? And some things that like were on my radar was a shit, and this might not be answering the letter to
No, no,
the
no.
question to the letter, but like strategic shifts, right? Like what are long-term bets that they're looking at? AI is something, defense industries is something else, and it's a savviness, right, that you'll see across the board, and this transcends also to like institutional investors as well. Look at the geopolitics and the state of the world. AI is something that's booming right now, right? People are saying it's a bubble. I don't think it's really a bubble in the sense like the internet, the dot-com boom or
Right.
bubble. I think this is something that's going to vastly transform the world as we know it. And defense is a unfortunate reality. People are profiting off of the wars that are going on, but also as AI evolves, right? So do certain threats like Runtime Ventures, that was your referral to me, Danielle, their
Yeah.
cybersecurity company. As AI begins to grow and people are implementing it somewhat haphazardly, depending on the context, you have more vulnerabilities. So that becomes more of a priority, right? And a lot of
Yeah.
these big firms need to protect themselves. They have cybersecurity insurance. That's
Yes.
something that is becoming more and more valuable and viable, I think, in terms of an investment. And then, yeah, shift towards strategic, or shift towards private credit. Green Street Capital, they were at Jaboy as well. They had a really cool presentation about the families they're working with, the different, rounds of fundraising that they're trying to do for their credit, for their different funds. That's something too. Crescent Capital also, they have a really interesting private credit division that I think is starting to grow and become pop up on the radar. Something also that most family offices, participate in is philanthropy.
Yeah.
75% of North American family offices are participating or they're making donations, right? And
Wow.
most of them are over $1 million, which is something that I think gets lost. So uh, can't answer that specifically, but those are some of the trends that I've
Yeah.
realized. And of course, and this relates with you,
Yeah.
technology adoption, right? Families are starting to modernize. It's something I've been talking about a lot. They're modernizing, they're becoming more professional in order to compete
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
the KKRs, the Carlyles, if that's the end goal for a family that wants to be really active with their investments. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I'll
Well,
stop there.
it's literally, and Ron refers to the baseball analogy, it's like unfolding in real time.
Yes, he says the second inning now. It's the
Yeah,
second inning of family offices.
we're still early, but it's really exciting to see. And this actually kind of leads into my next questions, kind of relating
Mm.
to the next gen and the role that they're playing and impact investing, and kind of, are you seeing this shift the way families are investing? Can you talk to those points?
Certainly. So that, and I did the VC 10X podcast the other day, and I touched on that question. A lot of people are talking about millennials and Gen Z and what their, preferences and how that's going to shape the future of family office investing. Like, I guess the bird's eye view, it's like, man, 80, is it 80 billion or 8 trillion? It's some insane number over the next 10 years that's moving.
84. Yeah.
84 trillion, right?
Yeah.
Or billion?
Trillion. Yeah. Like,
Trillion.
you can't
That's
even
moving.
picture
Yeah,
that.
it's and it's very true, right? We're up on the line, but people are forgetting about Gen X, right? They're the ones that are getting, within the next 5 to 10 years, the majority of the inheritance. It's getting passed down to Gen X. And that, again, I think is kind of a 50-50. You're not going to see this massive push that people for impact investing. Yes, that's becoming more and more relevant, but I think it's not going to be, a wild push where people are going to be revolutionizing the way that they invest. I think it's kind of going to be a 50-50 split towards the more, looking for, responsible investments, um, looking towards how can you improve the world, uh, making investments for the social good. I am seeing a lot of those companies pop up more, and I'm sure you are too. And I
Yeah,
think that's the right move. But in the ultimate goal of the family is to preserve their wealth, right?
yeah.
So I think as long as it aligns with that and they can make a return on investment,
Mhm.
then those will continue to be more popular.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that it won't be as rapid as people think that it will be, but that is the shift 100%.
I'm actually dropping in a link for everyone. So I'm very passionate about impact investing, and I just think it's a way that families can use their wealth to really change the world for the better. But I see it as well as being a way to kind of bring the family values and help, I think, with the generational wealth transfer. When you
Mm,
can get your family aligned, you can get, the younger generation involved in things that they're passionate about. And it's amazing, like the Rockefellers, they made their money in oil, but now the Abigail Rockefeller, or yeah, she's like investing in
sure.
all sorts of green energy, wind, solar. And it's just amazing to see, just the transformations and how you can get the younger generations involved. Um,
Totally. And,
yeah, so
and
we're
not
gonna
to
talk about that.
downplay that
Yeah,
evolution, but I will say that something that has become, I think, an there's an element of analysis where families are now incorporating social and environmental considerations with regards to their investments that I think wasn't happening. So the shift may be more like is more holistically is becoming, um, are these guys compliant with their energy and social governance, standards? Are
right.
they using the latest in renewables, and is there a good social impact? If not, we're going to pull out and we'll look at for something else that does. So I still think that for companies that have, that can align that, it's a huge plus. And yes, the Rockefellers and many other high profile families have made this aligns directly with their family values. And again, families are very different, but
Yeah.
finding the ones who do
Mhm.
that, I think is super important when it comes to raising capital.
All about alignment, which actually kind of plays in perfectly to our next topic. So approaching family offices, it's what everyone came here for, this arduous task. So what are some practical steps founders can take to initiate contact with family offices?
So it, so if we're assuming like you're starting fresh, right? Like where do you even begin?
Right.
And that there really wasn't an answer to that for the longest time, unless you're already like an insider. But yeah, you have to do your research and due diligence, right? Family office list, right? For example, great product. Um, they have
Body
then half the
align.
battle's done,
Yeah.
right? With the
Yeah.
access, you guys have a really exhaustive list. It's curated, and you're not going to find that type of information on a crunchbase.com or on a pitch book. Families have been so below the radar that it does take 100% of your effort just to fill in, right? And then, finding their sectors of interest, what their investment focuses are on, like that is huge. And prior to there really was no list prior to family office list that was worth investing in. And yeah, like Preqin, none of them. You're not going to really find the same product that you guys
Right.
have. So
More
obviously,
institutional focused. Yeah.
yes, and then then you find the families that you're interested in, then do due diligence on their legacy and their values. Where do they come from, right? For me, I like connecting with people and finding like areas, whether it's shared interests in the philanthropy or their history of investments, or something like, oh, their kid is going to the same college that my kid's going to, or that I went to, or you live in Seabrook. I love you. I'm
Yeah.
jealous. I love Kiwa. I love
Yeah.
Seabrook. I love Charleston, South Carolina. Um, so things like that, finding something to connect with them on a human level, and and not going with your hands out, because they know, like, again, 90% of their interactions are people pitching them, right?
Right,
So try and understand where they come from first, because you might think they're a good match, and then assuming you get, and as a result of them being pitched all the time, they put people in place to filter out, right? So
right.
when you get on there, when you start to learn, maybe they're not a good fit for you after all. Or maybe even approaching them from a mentor standpoint, not asking them for things. Like, that's how I've, like, Ron and I connected, because I saw what he was doing and filling up. There was a vacuum of really not much in the way of thought leadership with regards to family offices. And I saw his perspective, and I thought that was so cool. I wanted to interview him for
Yeah,
the family office growth newsletter, right? I send that out to my network of families, and I just started publishing it on LinkedIn. That's how we really connected, and I got tied in with him almost, was it a year, maybe 2 years ago? So and then, you know what's your story? They always have a story. Not actually, I should say, not all of them do. Like, this goes more to the advising a family office. This is changing, and I think it'll continue to change. But families are more increasingly, they're populating their website with the
yeah,
principal strategies that they invest in. I always use Ari Vato. Their website's arivatollc.com. I know Brian DeLucia. He's great. They're a big family office. They like real estate, but they're very specific with the areas that they're willing to invest in and participate in, right? That's like the gold standard. So if
make
you
it
do
easy for
have that,
everyone. Yeah,
it's
save
not, yeah, and
everyone
it's not the
time.
same. And yeah, and so but the families that do, they do, right? And Rockefeller's our famous example. They've been
Yeah,
around. There's history tied in with the country, so it'll be a little bit easier there. But what's your story? Does it align with theirs, right? It's about being human. Do you have the same mission and vision, whether it's not for your company, maybe as an entrepreneur? What do your values align? I think that's just like that, and maybe it's
right.
like a no-brainer, but that's how I will always approach my interactions with, like, new family offices. And you know social proof is huge too. If you know somebody that can make an introduction, even if it's on LinkedIn, I think that goes a very long way. Usually that's the difference between actually speaking with them and not.
Yeah,
um and if you don't have that, if they were on CNBC, or if they had thought leadership, or if they were quoted in an article, give them your thoughts. Like, start there, show them that you put some time
have a
into it. And
dialogue.
yeah, and so I think those are pretty good principles to kind of abide by. And more in terms of the investment part and looking for capital, you got to show them that there's a long-term vision there, right? That, I think, aligns with the usual goal of family offices. Um, and make sure you have the numbers. Make sure you can show how your business can endure across different market cycles and generations. And you know, with all of that, I think you should have a pretty good shot at connecting with some families.
That is such good advice because, that's,
Hmm.
I think when people are raising capital, they think of the institutional investors, and they're these big firms with processes in place. I mean, family offices, they're people, they're families. Some people do business with people. So do your
Yes,
research, put in the effort. And I know Ron says give, give, take. So find ways
yes,
to give. Don't just come and ask. And one way you can give is doing your research. Make sure that there is an alignment. So you're not wasting your own time, but more importantly, you're not wasting theirs. So awesome. Those are such good insights, Ryan. Um,
thank you.
so say you get the relationship, you get the conversation going, you have the opportunity to pitch this family office. What are some key elements that you want to include to make sure that it, aligns with the family office values?
Right. Really good question. And that's like some of this, that's one of the key services that I provide for my clients, right? Because well, it's not anytime, actually, I've been surprised recently. But when I onboard a new client, they're like, okay, when can I start speaking to families? And even I have to be strategic with these things, right? Your clip deck, or your one size fits all investor deck is not going to work for them. You really want to fine tune it. Again, just kind of piggybacking off those points that you just kind of drove home. Like, personalize it, show why, you could even throw, if they have like their family crest or something, include that on the pitch, show that it's specific for them and why it aligns with their long-term goals, their family values. Um, the giving and the relationship building aspect is really important. I feel like that will work, most times. And when you win them over personally, they're a lot more willing to look, because some families will say, yeah, send it over, and like they're never gonna look at it, right? They just did
Yeah.
it to get off the phone.
Yeah.
So making it as like personalized as possible is huge. Some other mistake, and on that point too, I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't follow up well, or they will follow up but it's kind of lackluster. um you know they might miss a meeting, they might lose an email, like, and I understand a lot with pitching it, people get used to the numbers mindset, but,
Right.
and yes, families are technically institutional investors, but they're really not. They're actually more of the in-between phase. And as a result of that, they don't have most of them don't have the resources that institutional investors or institutional firms do. So
Right.
the things will get lost in between the cracks. Maybe your email went to spam. Following up, with measure, right? I think that
I
sometimes will peak their, get them back on board.
build that relationship, have those checkpoints, and when you check in, like, how can you offer value too, not just think about me. And when you were talking earlier, so I'll share with everyone, there's a thought leader, Sam McKenna, and she's all about strategic sales, but she has actually trademarked a term, show
Hmm,
me, you know me. And it's true. It's like, if you're
I
trying to
like that.
relationship, you can't walk in expecting, like, this is all about me. It's show them you have done the research. You're serious. You're invested in this relationship before you even ask for anything. So I love, the points you brought up. So you kind of mentioned that, yeah, some of these family offices don't have the infrastructure in place to be looking at
Mm,
mass volume. Doesn't mean they don't receive mass volume. So what
right.
is the best way to differentiate yourself so that you can really stand out from all the other entrepreneurs out there who are pitching?
Yeah, that's the game, right? And it's tough. I can't stress enough, and you keep touching on it, but resist the urge to be overly transactional, because even though, yeah, they might miss your email, like, it's not personal, but every
Yeah,
interaction you have with them is usually quite personal. Because like my company, I'm Ryan Austin, my company is Erendite Advisors. You know, when I do business under that banner, and I have a personal connective like approach to things, but if
yeah,
I'm doing business under like the Austin family office, that's your name, that's your identity. So giving, being honest about your strengths and being transparent. And again, this is assuming, you are approaching a family who has a track record of investing in your sector, right? And so assuming that there's interest there, they could help you if you are honest. Don't oversell. If you have weaknesses and there's something that's stopping you from having growth potential, they're going to find out if they invest or not, right? But if you're open from the jump and make yourself
love
a
it.
little bit more vulnerable, they might they might appreciate that, right? Because with, again, I work with mostly startups, late stage startups, but startups nonetheless. You're still pretty much investing in the founders, right? And the personalities,
Totally.
and that's the superpower. So I think transparency builds trust, and keeping them, in the loop, and, maybe they should have replied to some follow-up email on like due diligence or something. And a week went by, but you don't want to nag them, but you see something that makes you think of them because you know that, they're doing philanthropy and this, and or this fund, and or that nonprofit just put out a press release, but hey, did you see this? Like,
Right.
keep them in mind, keep yourself on their mind as well in a positive way, and see if you can help them with things. I think, I don't know, that this isn't a masterclass in like building trust with people, but I can't say, like, you find the way that you can connect with people and add the most value to them without being transactional. And they usually will, when they see that, people tend to bend over backwards for you. And if they don't themselves invest, they might push you in the direction of somebody who they know can help. right? As
Yeah.
a strategic partner.
Yeah. You brought up two things that I wanted to add to that. Is yeah, I like the transparency because often, yes, of course, the family office is going to bring you capital, but if you do have a weakness, they might recognize and realize like that's the void we can fill, or we have this extensive network and we can solve that problem. So I think, yeah, being very open and honest and upfront, transparent right from the get-go, it might actually work to your advantage. It might make the partnership even stronger because they can, fill the void there. And of
Yes.
course, I've already forgot whatever my second one is. Just other ways you can give. Yeah, they love introductions.
Okay.
Like if you can give an introduction to another aligned family that they don't already know, that's like a great way that you can give. So yeah, I like that mindset of like, what can I give, not making it just transactional. All such good ideas, Ryan.
Yeah, and just to add really quick, that's actually how I got in with like Ron Diamond specifically, who's been so great to me. I saw, and I mentioned this briefly, that he was, really attending a lot of different conferences, speaking on all these panels, and he was starting to build a brand for himself. And I have these relationships with media people from my background in PR, right? We got him on NASDAQ Trade Talks. And if you believe in the messaging, it helps so much too. And I do that because I feel like there needs to be more voices of credibility in the family office space. And yeah, so and that's the stuff that I love. So that's how we really get along because of that. So that, and I do that for several families. And at Arendite, we give things away to the families, right? And that's what our founders know. We can get them in touch with them because they love us, right? Sometimes it's a lot of work, but it always pays off. And what is it? Rising tide lifts all ships type of
Yeah,
mentality. I think
yeah,
that's something that across the board is a positive mindset.
I love that. So we've kind of talked about a lot of the right way to do things. What are some of the common mistakes you see founders making? I know we've kind of talked about the whole transactional, but are there any other kind of like
Yeah.
don'ts?
Um, I've seen a lot. And I get it, getting upset, right? That maybe they don't see the value in your company.
Right.
Um, First of all, if they actually get back to you to tell you that they're not going to invest, like that's not fun on their side of things. That means that they actually care.
Yeah.
So if they say no, and assuming you have a good relationship with them, you're really disappointed because you're working towards this. And again, you shouldn't. I think of kind of adjacent to that is giving things with expecting stuff in return. Like don't fall into that trap, and it's easy to
Yeah.
do that. But hearing a no from a family, and like I've had it before too. I've had families that I'm like, this is a great company. They're like, yeah, this is literally, they said this is the top like 15% of deals that I see, but it's not quite there. And
Mm.
then, I'm talking with the founder and I'm like, is there anybody else that you would recommend? And he's like, well, the first thing they're going to ask me is, did you invest? How much did you invest? And they're going to say,
Right.
right. So, but they invited us to come back on the next round and they made some introductions to other people. So,
Nice.
I think it's a circumstantial type of thing, but most of the mistakes I see are in the early stages and we kind of covered them, right?
Yeah.
And then there's also like regular faux pas, like talking about politics.
Yeah.
I just ordinary, I guess. I don't know, that type of thing where, you turn
Common
people
sense.
off by accident. It's like, whoops.
Yeah.
And don't get too comfortable. And then just, yeah, things of that nature. That can happen anywhere though.
No, no, such good feedback. So I literally have like 100 more questions I wanted to ask you, but I'm mindful of your time. Ryan has another call at 2, so we're going to stop a few minutes shy of 2, but there are so many questions from
We,
the
we, we could do another 10 minutes. I'll do another 10.
Okay, okay, awesome.
Yeah,
Well, what I'll do is I'll move to some of the attendee questions, and then if we have more,
sure.
I'll take mine back up. But so Subs asks, how much are family offices looking at mergers and acquisitions to add to their portfolio? Not talking about private equity, plain business acquisition.
I quite a bit. Now that's, I am bombarded with a lot of different deals and opportunities. So I have like my horse blinders on. So if it doesn't fall,
Yeah.
unless it's a client that I have that is looking to be acquired or something along those lines, I tend to block out that stuff so that I'm not too distracted. But I know they're out there, and I know that's a big part, of the business because family offices, they're entrepreneurs, right? So they're always looking for different ways to generate value, and I'm sure that happens a lot. Just can't speak on it with authority.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we have mergers and acquisitions as a filter so we can identify, and there are quite a few. And yeah, I just think, like you said, oftentimes as well, they're looking for opportunities for the younger generation. They don't maybe want to be involved directly within the family office,
Sure.
business, so they'll find something for the younger generation. Thanks, Subs, for that question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and anyone, I'm going to just start reading from what's in the Q&A. Oh my goodness, there's 13. So, starting at the top, this is from Zach. What advice would you give to a medtech startup who has NIH and state commerce funding already? How would a family office receive in 2024 medtech opportunities? What are they looking for? What trips their trigger? What's kind of
Okay.
excellent story criteria? A lot of questions in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I've, uh, how would you say, I've talked to a lot of different founders that had some really incredible med tech startups, and getting that type of funding, that's usually the best type of start, right? Because where's the innovation happening in that space? Usually in like the hospitals, the universities, right? So if it's government backed, that's huge. To me, that's just a check that a family's going to ask before you even tell them, right? Like, who's backed? Who are you associated with? Like, what university are you operating out of? Things of that nature. So I think that's huge. And I guess the question was, triggers, or like, how would I approach a family, I guess, with that type of company?
Exactly.
Um, Conferences, and not, I would industry conferences
Yeah, I
specifically.
was gonna
And if
say
you
that
are,
else would have been great.
yeah, totally. And also, I mean, the great thing about operating or maybe getting your start out of a university, which I'm making some assumptions here, they have an endowment program. They have their own family offices and legacies that and again, I feel like the prevalence of multi-generational family offices in Europe and overseas is like they've been around quite a bit longer. So the legacy element is there. So I would say that's a good place to start. But the reason I say industry conferences is because, in my experience, and I did a lot of work with biotech and life sciences and health tech, is they have really cool niches of professional investors, and that usually will encompass family offices, ultra high net worth investors that are not family offices. So I would start within those localized networks and see where that takes you.
Yeah, awesome. From Tim, do you help family offices vet and invest in secondaries?
Sure. So yeah, and that's a big part of the my families that I would communicate with the most. They're big in the secondary market. So not vetting, possibly invest in. It depends. That's not something that I've had on my plate recently.
Right.
Um, and I have due diligence people, and so do the families that I deal with, because you have to be pretty sophisticated, I think, to, really participate in those markets. So, what was the question?
Well, and I was going to say, well, I'll reread the question, but maybe for those of the audience that don't necessarily know what the secondaries market is, will you touch on that? And we're actually on the 27th of November. We're featuring Ben Hart, and he's really going to focus on secondaries and why they appeal to family offices. But that's kind of Tim's question. So Tim, hopefully you
Okay.
can tune in. But yeah, do you help family offices vet and invest in secondaries?
Not quite, but I will say, I mean, generally speaking, and I guess this goes to the theme of approaching families, family offices like sweet deals. They like to be made, maybe I glossed over this entirely. They like to be made to feel special, right? So if you have like a regular investor deck and then you customize it for your company, regardless, secondary or otherwise, and
Mhm.
show them that you want families so much you're willing to give them a couple percentage points or some incentive, like they will bite. They almost always bite. And
Well,
an issue, again, I should have answered this before, mistakes I see made is that people will send their generic deck to families, but not only the generic pitch deck, their generic offer. Show them, even show them the regular offer that you give to everybody else, but the one that you're willing to give to them. It's
yeah,
worth it. It's worth those
that's
points.
awesome. That's such good advice. Yeah, I think, people sometimes overcomplicate it. You're like, it's psychology, like
Yes.
self in
Yes.
their shoes. Yeah, so that's awesome. Really good suggestion. Sharing resources also decrease the risk tolerance and acceptance rate of high reward, high risk investment opportunities.
Mhm.
How would you balance it?
How would I balance like giving and risk reward in terms of like your general interaction with the family or what you're willing to give up to get them on board? I guess is that the
Yeah, it's an anonymous attendee, so I can't call them out to clarify, but
it's a personal question. I guess I think that without harming your own interests, right? You can still align them with the family. If, if the profit's going to be smaller, but but that you're going to get them on board. I think it's worth making that sacrifice because especially most families are well connected amongst each other in their own communities. When
yeah,
one jumps on, you're going to have a bunch of others that follow. And,
glad you touched on
I've seen a family close around because they wanted to brag to their friends about it. And the difference was like $5 million. So
that.
for a $10 million round. So that's, again, overview. So
Yeah,
I've seen, the competitiveness that is cool too. And, so I think that comes down to the specifics.
awesome. So Doug asks, do you think that family offices will start to replace VCs when it comes to supporting startups? Such a
Oh,
good
great
question.
question.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, yes and no. So no, I don't think that they will replace venture capital or private equity, but I do think that they will disrupt it. And we had in August, NASDAQ Trade Talks did a roundtable with Ron Diamond, Jack Ablin from Crescent Capital, John Weaker from Core Spaces, and Ryan Eisenman from Arch. And the topic was, will family offices disrupt or be bigger than VC and private equity in the next 5 years? Or will
yeah,
they? And if so, when? And I would
yeah,
say within the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to start seeing that disruption taking place. Where back, in the, what was it, the 80s, I believe, when LBOs were, what is now private equity was starting to emerge with Madison Dearborn. I think family offices are at that place today.
yeah.
So it's still very early.
Second inning, right?
Yeah, second inning. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, Doug has another question. Also, on heads in beds business, which is more attractive to family office? Hospitality, multifamily, or even student housing? Okay, so I guess we're talking real estate here.
Student housing. Just from my experience, like that's what I've been hearing a lot. I've seen a lot. Oh, Crane Currency, which is a
Yeah,
great publication, and they do really
yeah,
good reporting on family office trends. I
yeah,
remember an article from like maybe a year ago now about the Sun Belt and
yeah,
student housing. I mean, that's one thing is not going to be going away anytime soon.
so true.
So
Yeah,
that's just what I've been hearing the most. But
yeah,
those other sectors I haven't focused on much recently, or
yeah.
real estate much for that matter until very recently.
Yes,
So
yes. Yeah, I always know when our filters exist or our filters are dynamic, they get added as we see trends. And yeah, student housing is in there. I
huge.
think, to your comment earlier, just about almost every family office does invest in real estate in some form,
Yes.
whether it's additional homes or something more of an investment. But yeah. So Carrick asks, oh, and I am Ryan,
I know we're coming up on
1:55.
time. You know what I'm
So
gonna do? I'm gonna
I
post my LinkedIn, I guess, and anybody that whose question I didn't answer,
There
you
you
can
go.
message me.
Oh, there are a lot. So what I'll
Oh,
do,
wow. That's so cool. I feel so
there are a
popular.
lot, which is awesome. You guys were such an amazing audience. Ryan, I'm going to download the chat. I'll download everything so that he can get these and he can follow up. You can find
Thank
Ryan
you.
in Erudite Advisors. This was awesome. I think there'll have to be like a part two just by popular.
I would love to.
Well, thanks, Ryan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
I
you so
will
much.
follow up tomorrow with an email. We'll include the recording as well. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Danielle.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Bye.